So we've done our part.
Okay. Well, welcome, David, especially.
It's
been a while,
Yeah,
so-
welcome back, David.
Like almost a year, I think.
Almost a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or David.
Anais.
Oh,
Anais?
Anais.
Anais. Nice to meet you.
yeah, David was doing this group for a while, and even like set us up with this. There was the technology
Yeah.
to do the hangouts.
Be
And
back
was-
for a while.
Yeah, I'll be coming in monthly now.
Oh, good.
And it was in the last or one of the last Jukai groups now. Anais is on Rakusu.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I did it 2 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long.
It was in the fall. Huh?
Yeah.
That's great.
And David does important waste management things in Monterey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We run a recycling plant, and we do a lot of resource recovery work.
And he
Pretty
does
exciting.
important transport work in Santa Cruz.
Really?
Yeah, I work for the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation.
Oh, all
Commission.
right.
Oh.
Nice. Great.
Which agency?
Uh,
Or is it?
Monterey Regional Waste Management District
Yeah.
in Marina.
So this is the last end of the platform of Suttra, and not that many people commented on this new idea, but if you said sure of this, starting an experiment of jewels in the world without a particular book that we're going through, but just that anybody in the group could bring any Dharma related topic and kind of just lead a discussion, which is kind of what we do anyway. But it could be really open, topic subject, which we did for a while years ago in this group, and that was a lot of fun. I forget why we stopped. Anyway, it's fine with me. If we want to pick another book as a kind of focus to go through, we can do that way too. But what do y'all think?
Actually, there was something I was going to suggest. I need to go back and check the title again. I'll tell you. A couple of things I'll say, if we want to. Dipping occasionally into a book, want to go back and forth between methods. Spontaneous method and book study method.
Yeah, there was a book in mind.
I do. Let me get back to you guys on it.
Sure, and I have a list that we compiled of possible books, and it's not that there's no lack of that. It could be that too. What do you all think?
I like the idea of spontaneous discussion.
Yeah, I do too.
Group.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of happening with the Saturday
Yeah.
Sangha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's duplicative of something we're already doing here, but it's. I mean, we could connect it spontaneous, but yet connected to your everyday life practice. I'm trying to keep the theme of the jewels in the world, bringing the Dharma to your
Yeah, that's kind of
outside of the Zen
the
center.
theme. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is similar to the Saturday Sangha. And I thought if we did it this new way, I was imagining advertising it more as a new type of thing, and more people might be interested instead of like the middle of the platform sutra.
Yeah.
And for example, like Nancy found this article about anger. That would be like that kind of thing that could come into this group.
Yeah, my thought would be if we did it that way, it would be nice to connect it to an article that whoever's leading sends it out to everyone, so we still have something that we've all commonly read.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be kind of nice, so we're not just
Pre-think it a little bit.
yeah. So it's still got that little bit of sort of I don't know what you call it, but a little
Some
bit of scholarly
structure.
depth to it. We've looked at something and read something.
Which is how this is.
Yeah, except it's just each time it'll be a different topic based on someone's particular inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that way it would be a little different to the Saturday Sangha because it's really very spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reading material. Whereas we would someone would send out an article or a chapter from a book or something.
Mm-hmm.
That was my thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that would be nice to experiment and it would allow like a fresh opportunity to advertise the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we could then also, when it's Jewels in the World, we could say this month the topic is going to be such and such. And people could then
We could just post it on Facebook every month and say this is what's happening. This
I
month
never
is
thought about that. Or
topic
on
this.
the notice board. Yeah, so people can come and it won't be, they won't be coming into the middle of something.
So they don't have to commit to a long-term, basic.
No, it really like it is kind of a drop in right now is how we changed it, but nobody really picked up on that because I think it doesn't have that feeling. And it could be that something beforehand to get people thinking, but if people didn't have a digital form of an article, for example, they could even just write like a paragraph. Could be maybe even put something between a paragraph and 10 pages or for something that's it's not like read this whole book. And so it could take different forms like that.
I agree. I think it's great to have something to kind of chew on before coming here, and then hear other people's thoughts. Like, oh yeah, I didn't think of it that way, or we can have more of a discussion that we kind of prepared for.
Yeah. Well, let's try this out. And if you have a book in mind, you could even choose a chapter from that book.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And then the next round to choose the next chapter. So that would be really
So we have to start
And then choose chapter 2.
What's in it?
We could try. I mean, there's nothing to lose, and if it seems like it's not lively enough or something, we could keep changing the format and see what people might be interested. The group is getting slowly smaller, I think. So see if that
is more inclusive.
Yeah, be more inclusive.
Sure.
And and I like the idea of thinking of jewels in the world, like practice in daily life kind of themes, as opposed to like nuances of meditation methods and stuff. Could be done too, but
as for the articles that we sent out, I like the idea of being something scholarly, but I also think that just sort of Buddhist take on something, even if it's a poem or an excerpt from another kind of scripture, to allow for that more broader interest. As long as we frame it within the context of our practice.
That's right. It could even be like a poem that's not explicitly Buddhist, but has that theme that can be interesting. And then because we're Zen practitioners, the conversation has that feeling.
You could cue the conversation off. This made me think of this particular conversation.
So if that's what we're going to do, I'd be happy to volunteer. Also think of something that might actually be a little different and capture people, something in the psychological range, like anger, fear and guilt. There's sort of an article that deals with, say, some of the harder emotions. I could find some material on that and a bit of a discussion, and that might be a way to pull in some people who maybe feel a little intimidated by this kind of way of studying. I think so, that's right. You could even use this one that we had. This anger one, the Korean teacher. Because I mentioned that in that email, which maybe a few people here saw, and a few people contacted me and said, that sounds like a great topic. So maybe that one. See if I can find more information.
Okay, so next month.
Unless someone else wants to go first. So I don't think I've waited for a while.
Okay. That's November 16th. Okay. And we'll try and we'll write something up. And meanwhile.
Tony's not on, but we can go ahead and start.
Okay.
Set up.
So as you know, we were given the last bit from sections, I think it was section 51 to the end, and the appendix. And though I found some things that I liked, that I was touched by, I found of interest in the last few sections. What I really enjoyed was this first appendix. I don't really all got a chance to read it, but it was, I thought it was very delightful and really fascinating because these are all stories of Reno's encounters um, uh, with um, with people who have come to him uh, with questions, and there's some really amazing, wonderful stories.
And some famous Zen stories.
Some famous Zen stories, and I found them all really interesting, and some more than others. For example, let me go to so the two that I found particularly just really fascinating was first was number 10 on page 289, and this is, if you haven't read it, it's a day that the sixth patriarch ancestor went to wash the patriarch's robe, which I guess was the fifth ancestor's robe. But the water wasn't pure enough there where it was, so he went looking, and he walked 3 li, and I happen to know, I checked, that li is about a third of a mile, about 5 li, pardon me. So I guess about 1.5 miles from where he was, before he found a place that was auspicious enough. And this was the famous thing we encountered and when we were there.
I was going to bring the photos of this fountain, but I forgot to bring. Yeah.
Yeah, but you bring it next time. I really want to see that again. I got one picture of all of us kind of crowded around this. So he found this auspicious spot, and he struck his stick, and out gushed water. And so again, it's fascinating because we were there, and I hadn't read the full story. I never knew the whole story about the spring until I read this.
Kind of a magic.
Yeah.
Struck the ground.
And and clearly, if this monk, if this person, Fang Pian, hadn't happened to have been there to see it, no one would have known that he did this, which I think is. So I just wanted to bring this up because it was something that it was personal, and since we who were in China for that trip saw this particular place where this happened.
Just running because I know where it is. In the library.
Shall we read it out?
Yeah.
Because I didn't get to read it.
Yeah, why don't you start reading?
Okay. One day the master wanted to wash the patriarch's robe, but there wasn't any pure water. There wasn't water pure enough. So he hiked behind the monastery 5 li or so until he saw a place where the vegetation and the air were sufficiently auspicious. He then struck his staff on the ground, and a spring gushed forth in response, and it kept flowing until it formed a pond. Then he kneeled down and washed the robe on a rock. Clothes were usually washed by using a rock or other flat surface like a washing board. Suddenly a monk appeared and bowed. He said, "I am Fiang Pian, and I am from Western Shu, the western half of Sichuan province around Chengdu. Recently in southern India, I met Master Bodhidharma, and he told me, 'Go back quickly to the land of Tang. The treasure of the true Dharma eye and the robe of Kasyapa that I transmitted has been passed down for 6 generations now. Go to Shaoshu in Shaochao Prefecture to see for yourself and pay your respects. So I have come all this way in hopes of seeing the robe and bowl transmitted by my master.'"
Let's go a second because he's talking about something that seems on the face of it to be quite fabulous and impossible, and him saying that he met, that recently he's in India, I met Master Bodhidharma, who by that time had been dead about 500 years. So I thought that was, what do you make of that?
Then you saw Bodhidharma.
Recently in southern India, I met Master Bodhidharma.
Yeah.
And he told me, go back quickly to the land of Tang. It was a really fantastic story.
Yeah, the whole thing is pretty
It's
fantastic.
looking pretty fantastic. The spring and the Bodhidharma. Apparently still alive in India back in the years after his death.
So, who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe he's saying, I saw with the same eyes as Bodhidharma.
Maybe figuratively.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe figuratively,
Mm.
he had enough experience.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sixth generation says that the treasure of the true Dharma eye and the robe of Kashyapa that I transmitted have been passed down for 6 generations now. So it was 6 generations, but before that he had first appeared.
Yeah, that whole story almost just, it's less of like Dharma conversation and more just like establishing a legend of the magical sixth ancestor and his legacy.
Yeah.
So here's I guess I have another photo I guess on the computer. This is the fountain.
I've got one like this too, with a bunch of heads turned over.
Yeah, you could drink from the fountain. It was behind the main temple where the sixth ancestor's body was. There's 9 dragon spring open when Huineng struck the ground with his staff. And then there's this koan that I can't remember if I don't think it's one of the main collections, where it's what is one drop from the fount of Cao Shi, which is the name, the place where he's living. And so this is actually after the time of the sixth ancestor. Some monks says, what's one drop from the fount of Cao Shi, meaning like the Zen of the sixth ancestor. And Fa Yan, another Zen teacher, says, it's one drop from the fount of Cao Shi. So it's just a reference to this fountain. The one I was thinking, there's Scott and I in front.
I know that picture.
Yeah, with the sixth ancestor
My goodness,
behind.
this was a while ago.
It was a while ago, yeah.
2000.
2000?
17 years ago.
17 years ago.
And was another kind of photo, digital photo of this frieze, like a carved stone mural next to the fountain
Yeah.
with the scene of the staff hitting the ground and the water coming out.
I've got a picture of that.
Is this where all the places you visited?
Yeah, yeah. This is
Oh.
the monastery in China where I went. So it's southern school, right? So Shaoxi, Huineng is way down in the south here, southern part of China.
Good copy of that map. That's wonderful.
Sure, Andy Ferguson had even more detailed one.
Yeah.
So we were just reading it out. Do you want to continue on?
Did you finish with the, where did you finish?
The master showed them to him. I think I got about there. Top of 290.
The master showed them to him. Then he asked, what sort of work do you do? Feng Pian, I'm not sure how to say that, said, I'm a sculptor. The master turned serious and said, make a statue of me. Feng Pian was dumbfounded, but after a few days, he produced a sculpture that was a perfect likeness. It was only 7 inches high, but the workmanship was marvelous. The master smiled and said, you only understand the nature of statues. You don't understand the nature of Buddhas. The master stretched out his arm and felt the top of Feng Pian's head and said, you will be a permanent field of blessings for humans and gods. Very good.
The master also
Right here.
Oh, the master smiled and said,
the master also rewarded him.
okay, one more paragraph. Okay. The master also rewarded him with a robe, which Fang Qian divided into 3 parts. One he used to cover the statue, 1 part he kept for himself, and 1 part he wrapped into palm leaves buried in the ground. And he made an oath, I will find this robe in another life when I am the abbot of this place, and when I rebuild its shrine halls. According to one commentary, in the 8th year of Chayu period of Song Dynasty, a monk named Wei Xin was digging while repairing the shrine hall and found the robe, which still looked new. He took it to Kaohsiung Temple, and whoever put it on had their prayers answered. You want to go?
And the other, as I said, I really enjoyed all of these stories, all of them. What I thought were really interesting. And a couple others. Number 12, Chia Chia Shin Chung. For a number of reasons, we can read it out.
It's a long section.
It's a long one, but the story is that, which I found really quite shocking, that supposedly Xin Shui, the head of the northern school, sent an assassin to kill Hui Neng. I don't know if that's also true or not, but that's really shocking. And this assassin is a person of the story, and Hui Neng was aware that this was going to happen, and he stretched out his neck when he arrived to offer his neck, and the assassin hacked at it with a sword, but didn't make a mark. And then so when Xin Chang realized who he was dealing with, he became overcome, and he asked to for his forgiveness and to become a monk. And Hui Neng, quite remarkably, told him that he better go away for now, so that otherwise his disciples would hurt him, and to come back later in disguise, which I thought was another kind of remarkable response to make, because someone would just try to kill you.
Funny, it sounds a little bit like the original famous story at the beginning of the whole Sutra, except just a more dramatic version. Instead of just coming to take the bowl on the robe, it's coming to cut him with a knife. And then him saying, go away, because otherwise, you know, if you stay, people will be jealous. Is a bit also like what happened to Hui Neng himself. And the fifth ancestor told him to head off.
And remember also that the monk who finally did did go capture Hui Neng at that stage when he was running away, was awakened by him and became his disciple. That went on. But yeah, so it's a strange story there too.
It's a strange karma.
But beyond the strange story, I really found Hui Neng's story about permanence and impermanence to be really interesting.
Yes.
And I want to look at it more closely and really kind of meditate on it, because
it's a little bit hard what he's saying.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to follow. I sort of get it intellectually, what he's saying there, but it's so the reverse of what everyone thinks.
Yes.
thinks.
And a footnote on this is that Dogen has a fascicle in Shogun, they're called Buddha Nature, where he quotes like everything you can find about Buddha nature, and he quotes this story from the Platform Sutra, and I always thought it was a strange story.
Strange story.
Because it's kind of what Dogen likes to do too, is to take a normal teaching like Buddha nature is permanent and unchanging and reverse it. So maybe that's why Dogen liked it. And,
So
can we read it?
maybe you could, where the master said,
I want to read this part right here. Where back, yeah.
Yeah, there's this section and then that section, kind of explains it.
What page?
Page of 292, bottom of,
Mhm.
to the top of 293.
Okay.
Maybe like where the master said, "What is impermanent?" is where this section starts.
Where is that?
Will I read? Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Why don't you, Cook, or someone, why don't you start with that and read down to the bottom of the page, and I'll read this
Okay.
section here.
So the master said, "What is impermanent is your Buddha nature. What is permanent is the mind that discriminates all good and bad dharmas." And Shin Chang said, "But the master's explanation completely contradicts what the sutra says." It's the opposite of the Nirvana Sutra. The master said, "I transmit the Buddha mind seal of Buddhas. How could I dare contradict the sutras of the Buddha?" Shin Chang said, "But the sutra says the Buddha nature is permanent, yet the master says it's impermanent, and the good and bad dharmas, even the Bodhi mind, are all impermanent, and yet the master says that they are permanent. These are contradictions and have only made this student even more perplexed." The master said, "In the past, when I heard the nun Wu Jin Zan reciting the Nirvana Sutra, I explained it to her, and not one of my explanations or interpretations failed to agree with the sutra. Nor is that the case now with you." Shin Chang said, "This student's intelligence is limited. Could the master please explain the ins and outs of this?"
The master said, "Don't you realize that if the Buddha nature, much less any good or bad dharma you can name, is permanent, then between now and the end of the kalpa, no one will be able to set their mind on enlightenment. Thus, what I call impermanent is simply what the Buddha calls the way of true permanence. Moreover, if dharmas were all impermanent, then the self-nature of everything would be subject to birth and death." And this is my favorite line here. "But there is no place where the nature that is truly permanent doesn't reach. Thus, what I call permanent is simply what the Buddha means by true impermanence." That's deep, folks. That's really deep.
Yeah, so the sutra offers a great teaching about Buddha nature, and it's one of the key teachings about Buddha nature that's unusual. That's part of what makes the Buddha nature teachings unusual, because in the early Buddhism, the Buddha just taught that all things are impermanent, and there were no exceptions to that. So in this Mahayana Nirvana Sutra is one where Buddha nature is first introduced. It says there actually is this Buddha nature, and it's not impermanent. It doesn't come and go, and it's even like its true permanence, as the sutra says. It's our true self. The Buddha says, it gets quoted down here, and it's truly blissful as opposed to suffering, and it's truly pure as opposed to impure. Which is kind of the reverse of early Buddhism, where everything is impure, everything is suffering, everything is impermanent, and everything is not self. So it's the opposite of each of those Buddha natures. And so now, and that's already was radical teaching in its time, and now the Six Sound Sisters taking that and like reversing it again. A little hard to follow. But then in the paragraph you just read, he tries to give the reasons for why he says that, which are a little bit hard
This
to follow.
It sort of reminds me of the kind of complex language
Do you want to have a look?
that
Sorry.
Garjuna used
Mm-hmm.
in talking about permanence and impermanence.
Yeah, it's a little bit like sort of dialectic.
Yeah, but I think I just felt it was a really beautiful thing to say.
But I think I see what you say like about Nagarjuna, because if there's if anything is permanent, even Buddha nature, then there's no access to it because we are impermanent. So which is a little bit funny reasoning because Buddha nature is not a thing in the first place, which is why the Buddha could say that it is permanent.
Do you think he's talking about not seeing it in a dual form, like permanence and permanence, and seeing it in a
Yeah, I do think, yeah.
non-dual, like
Yeah.
to call it permanent is
Yeah,
too
one-sided.
too one-sided. It's also this
Mhm.
because
Mm-hmm.
Buddha nature is all inclusive of all things.
Yeah, and another way before I don't think that when Dogen quotes the story, he I think brings up the original part and he doesn't give this, and I think that Dogen might bring this out more, but I think another way to look at it would be that Buddha nature is formless. You could say it's just like the ungraspable, formless, spaceless, timeless awareness that doesn't change. But we know it through all things. Like everything is an expression of Buddha nature, and everything is, of course, impermanent. So that's how I was hearing it. Yeah, you could hear Buddha nature itself in its ungraspable form doesn't change. But since everything is Buddha nature, the world of impermanent things is also Buddha nature, which is kind of expressing non-duality between things and the awareness of them.
And also from the literary form, it reminds me of the whole section where he likes to play with opposites.
Yeah, yes.
You know, as a method of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So might just be his style again to.
yeah. He does
Talk
like to
about
play with the
opposites.
opposites.
Just
Mhm.
when you think you've got it, then he's going to flip you to the other.
Yeah, and I think the second,
He's a little Zen teacher.
Yes.
I think you got it.
the second half of the paragraph I thought was actually a little bit easier to understand, where why is it that all these impermanent things are actually permanent? He says, if all dharmas, all phenomena were impermanent, then the self nature of everything would be subject to birth and death, or the Buddha nature of everything. But there is no place where the nature that's truly permanent doesn't reach. That's what I would like to.
Yeah.
So they could say the actual nature of all this impermanent stuff is Buddha nature, and that doesn't change. So the true nature of the impermanent stuff is permanent. So therefore we call impermanent things permanent. So that teaching.
It's like, you know, it sort of goes back to his insight where he mentioned earlier that affliction is enlightenment.
Yeah, well, that's just like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where from his exalted, you know, realization, all those kind of distinctions were only distinctions, you know, that were made by beings who didn't see the true nature of things.
Yeah, that's right. So the true nature of affliction is enlightenment, because everything, including what we call affliction, in its true nature is an expression of logic.
He makes a point several times in some of these conversations where he says, you know, where he points out that if you have to go somewhere to get enlightened, then you can't be enlightened, because if it's not here, then it couldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's here.
Mm-hmm.
It's here now, as it is, as you are, and you can't go somewhere to find it because it's already here. If it was something you had to go to, then it wouldn't be enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be the perfect enlightenment.
That's right. And it would be something that would come and go if it wasn't here, but it
Yeah.
was somewhere else.
And then the next story about the imperial emissary is also really, I think, really fascinating also, because you may all know about Empress Wu, the famous Empress Wu, who became empress by basically murdering everyone away. Set herself up as being this great bodhisattva during her lifetime, saying that she was the representation of Buddha in the world, and she was, you know, and she was basically Buddha's manifestation in the world is the in-person. And
Good political move.
I could put and so she invites the sixth ancestor to come to the capital, and I think he declines on the grounds of illness. And in his conversation with the emissary, which is really, I think, really interesting, at the bottom of page 294, there's this paragraph. Want to read that paragraph?
Sure.
It's about 294 that begins, the master said, the way is realized.
The master said, the way is realized by the mind. How could it depend on sitting? The sutra says, in editor's note, this is paraphrased from the Diamond Sutra. The sutra says, to claim that Tathagata sits or lies down is to travel the path of falsehood. And how so? Because he does not come from anywhere and he does not go anywhere. To be free of origination and free of cessation, this is the pure meditation of the Tathagata. When all dharmas are empty and still, this is the pure sitting of the Tathagata. Ultimately, there is no attaining, much less any sitting.
I love that. Yes.
And like then later Dogen says in the Fukanze Zengi, Zazen that he speaks of is not a matter of sitting or lying down. Of course, we do this sitting posture thing, but the actual Zazen doesn't depend on posture.
This is what he says on the next page, in the middle of the next page, 295, where he says, the master said, the emissary makes a sort of traditional distinction between darkness and light, and the sixth ancestor sort of poo-poos that, saying that that's just a conventional way of looking at things, basically. That the way is neither dark nor light.
And here's where it says, affliction is
enlightenment. They aren't two and they aren't separate. If you use wisdom to eliminate affliction, this is the view of those who follow the two vehicles, meaning Hinayana, who use the devices of the sheep and the deer carts, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. People of higher wisdom and greater ability are not like this. So, and then after this conversation, the emissary is awakened. And he shall experience a great awakening. And he bowed and said goodbye. and then Empress Wu sends him, I'm sure they also sends him a precious robe and a crystal begging bowl. I wonder what happened to that.
I think that was, as I recall, from this long time ago, at the at Shaoxi, at the Six Ancestors Temple, there was this stupa, like a large pagoda-style, multi-roof kind of stupa, and they said that inside that was that robe and bowl from the emperor. And I think we asked, like, was it the Bodhidharma's robe that got passed on? And I think that they said, no, that one would really actually, that would be great. But we know that one was lost, but this one that really was given to him by the empress is locked in as you couldn't see it, but it was apparently in there. So apparently, this was a nice paragraph I thought, near the bottom of 295. Our true nature, our Buddha nature, doesn't shrink in an ordinary person or expand in a wise person. It isn't confused by affliction. It isn't stilled by meditation or samadhi. It isn't annihilated and it doesn't last forever. It doesn't come and go. It isn't inside, outside, or in between. It doesn't begin and doesn't end. Our nature and its attributes are simply so.
It's like the first non-cryptic paragraph.
Yeah,
ever in
it's
the
pretty
text for a
straightforward.
long time.
It's true.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It lasts forever and never changes it, and that is what we call the way.
Mm-hmm. So now we're here, that's permanent again.
It's neither cryptic nor non-cryptic.
And I did like this statement here, on the next page, the last page, 296. We talked about beginning and end, where the emissary asks him about how does his teaching differ from the master's claim that it doesn't begin and doesn't end, different from other sects. And what he says that when other sects speak of no beginning and no end, they use the end to put a stop to the beginning, and they use the beginning to highlight the end. But like in the end to no end, and they call the beginning no beginning. But when I speak of no beginning and no end, there is no beginning. There is no beginning in the first place, so there can't be any end. I thought that was so freeing in some odd way. Right? There's no beginning, so
You don't even need to mention.
it's not even talking about ending because there's no ending since there's no beginning to start with. That's my.
Do others have pieces that they wanted to, the highlights that stood out? There's several of the famous end stories. Is this so-called overnight guest, who is this Jung Jiao, who wrote this song of enlightenment, and he came and just walked around the sixth ancestor once and had nothing really to say. And then just had this short dialogue, and then he was like, "Okay, I got it," and he was about to leave, and he said, "Why don't you just at least stay the night?" And so it was kind of this sudden realization, and he became, and it's where this line, maybe this line that's written on the Han, that board outside, is birth and death are important, or are the great matter. Impermanence is swift or transient, he says. And maybe quoting something older, but maybe that this is the source of that verse on the Han. And the other two that are also, Dogen really likes both of these stories, are Qin Yuan, who is our lineage, Seigen Yoshi Daisho, disciple of the sixth ancestor that became the Soto Zen lineage. And that's the story about there are no stages.
Yeah, so we're staging that.
Yeah, it says Shin Su. This is Qin Yuan, Shin Su, or Seigen Yoshi, number 5. That one on page 284. This translation is a little funny, I think.
Yeah.
He comes to Huineng and says, "What can one do to avoid becoming stuck in stages?" And Huineng says, "Well, what do you know how to do?" Or this translated, "Well, what do you practice now?" And this one says, Qin Yuan says, "Nothing that has to do with Buddhism." And I think it's literally, I don't even practice the holy truths, or the noble truths. And then Huineng says, "So then what stage could you get stuck in?" And he says, "Since I don't even practice the holy truths, or I don't have anything to do with Buddhism, what stage could I be in?" So he sort of like answers it himself. And then Huineng says, "You should lead a congregation in somewhere else and not let it die out." And of course, that's our lineage that came down to the present through Shin Su.
Oh yeah, teacher of She had two patriarchal what became one of the
Yeah.
Sutras.
Yeah, yeah. So Seki Toki Sen, who wrote this, the Merging of Difference and Unity, is the student of this ancestor. And the other one that Dogen really likes this story too is Hui Zhang, or Nan Yue Hui Zhang. And it's where he comes to the sixth ancestor and who asks him, where are you coming from? He says, I come from Mount Sun. And William says, what sort of thing comes here like this? Often it's translated, what is it that thus comes? And William says, to say it's a thing, to say it's anything, or to say it's this, misses the mark. And then, can it be cultivated or experienced? William asks. And that's literally practice and realization, which Dogen really loves this compound practice realization, which is from this story. Okay. So, what is it that thus comes? And the student says, to say it's this, even that misses the mark. And then Wenheng says, well, and then is there no practice and realization? And more familiar translation is, it's not that there's no practice and realization, it's just that they can't be defiled. And then Huineng says, just this non-defilement is what's treasured by all Buddhas. You're like this and I'm like this. And then that became the Rinzai lineage, comes from this non-way of Buddha.
What page are you on there?
285.
Number 6.
That made me think of, I forget what you called it once, but where somebody gets into a state where they think nothing matters, everything's empty. So it doesn't matter what I do because there is no right way or wrong way to do it. So
it is like that.
It's like, I don't remember what you called that though.
Nihilism, maybe, or emptiness, sickness.
Yeah, that I think you called it
Zen
Zen sickness. That's what you called it. Zen sickness.
Yeah, so it is kind of like that. To say it's this misses the mark, kind of like you can't say anything.
Yeah.
And then to kind of test is if it's that Zen nihilistic kind of Zen sickness. Huineng says, well then, do you mean that there's no practice and no realization? And he beautifully answers, it's not that there's no practice and realization. It's like a double negative. It's not that there's no practice and realization. It's just that they can't be defiled. And I think Dogen, I think you could hear like this translation is, I think, misses some of these nuances. But I think one way to hear that Dogen, I think, likes to present it as is that practice and realization can't be defiled by any idea, but also they can't be defiled by like splitting them into two things. That it's practice leading to realization. It's practice itself, it is realization, and that's one of Dogen's main points.
Sort of like the lamp and the light.
Yeah, like the lamp and the light. Yeah, you could talk about these two sides, but they're really not two different things. Yeah. Other pieces that you wanted to bring up?
I was reminded that when you were talking about not falling into stages, reminded of that beginning of, is it Reb's book of Being Upright, where he talks about a conversation with who was it? Tibetan, I think it was Tibetan, right? And he asked him, what stage are you in, or something like that. And he's like, well, we try not to get into stages.
Yeah.
The Tibetan guy's like, oh, that's really advanced.
Yeah.
I know, we can't do it.
That's right. They're like, we teach stages for a long time before we get into stagelessness, but in Zen, we just right from the start, there's no stages. Yeah.
There was a comment that Red Pine makes earlier before that on page 262 that I liked. Halfway down where he says, it may seem a bit odd, this emphasis on the list of people who transmitted the direct teaching whereby we see our nature and become Buddhas. But realizing the truth of this teaching is another kind of rebirth, the rebirth of no birth. And that those who find themselves in the land of no birth have used such means as this to honor their spiritual parents. I just like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is nice.
The rebirth of no birth. And those who find themselves in the land of no birth honor their spiritual parents.
By, for example, reciting these names of the lineage. So that's maybe see that's maybe the first Zen teaching where the seven Buddhas and then these 28 Indian ancestors up to the 6th ancestor are listed. And then if you still that list slightly different from this, there's slightly different versions of the list, but we still chant even here. And that reminds me that there's this new book called Kobin's Teaching on the Platform Sutra. That somebody just people, Kobin students at Kikoji, so they just sort of like self-publish this. They did one on the Heart Sutra, but this one I could just find the browser down from Kikoji. So if you want, I think you can get them up there. It's not like in the bookstore. And his picture is the when you put the robe in the bowl on the stone and then hid behind a tree. That's such a funny. It's a floating robe.
And a tiny bowl.
And a tiny bowl, yeah. So they have on the left side, it's an old translation of the Platform Sutra, and on the right side is Kobin's commentary. But on this section, it doesn't have all the appendices that we were just looking at. But this part about the lineage of the Indian ancestors, I thought Kobin had a nice point here. He says these 40 ancestors, in time and space you count 40 ancestor Buddhas, but it doesn't mean just 40, it's infinity. Innumerable Buddhas are 40. And this was a nice metaphor, I think. Like when you count days, you mean the number of welcomings of the sun. Counting a day is right. The welcoming of the sun on the new day. But for the sun, it's always just one day. Counting is human work. It sounds strange when I say Shakyamuni Buddha is still living. People ask me, well, where does he live? When I say the sun is still shining, you can feel how I feel Shakyamuni Buddha exists. So I thought it's a nice way to look at the lineage of ancestors. It's like we count them like one by one up to these 40 different names, but from the point of view of the Buddha mind that they really are, there's just one of them. Like there's really only one day from the point of view of the sun.
The Dharma is just never dies.
Yeah.
It's not like it's going from you to you. It's not like it's hopping from one person to the other. Where
That's
you
right.
count it.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. Like the sun never moves, but for us moving humans, we keep reading it like it's moving.
Never thought I had about that too. I can't remember when we were reading it, but the thought I had as we were is that although it might seem strange, it only seems strange if we're feeling separate from all those ancestors. If we're not feeling separate from them, then saying all their names isn't such a mechanical sounding thing.
Yeah.
It only sounds mechanical. Like sometimes on our Monday mornings when we have new people, sometimes on Monday morning and we recite all these names, I feel a little bit worried.
Yeah.
How are they feeling that we're reciting name after name after name? It sounds mechanical.
Yeah.
But if we see ourselves in all of those names, then it doesn't seem strange at all.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, we're reciting our own names.
Yeah.
there's another section which we could get into it. We could spend like a long time on this section, but I thought I appreciated this one. It gets a little bit tricky. Number 2 in the appendix, Jurtone, and it's on it's 5 ranks. And again, it's related to this mashing up these lists. So it's about the 3 bodies, the 3 Buddha bodies, the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, and these 4 kinds of knowledge, which is, this is where jnana that you talked about in session, I was saying, I think a better translation for this is knowing or awareness, a non-dual, undivided knowing is jnana, but there's 4 types. And so this is like Yogacara teaching that Huineng is kind of, it's maybe the most sort of technical that Huineng ever gets, but he's matching up these 3 Buddha bodies with these 4 kinds of knowing and the 8 consciousnesses being transformed. So it's maybe too much to get into, but I thought it was neat that he bothers to get into it. And if one's ever studying how these work, this is kind of like Yogacara teaching how the 8 consciousnesses are transformed into these 4 types of knowing, which themselves are these 3 Buddha bodies. So these kind of like 3 different lists, which could be like written as a kind of chart. And I think it's a beautiful teaching. This comes out of this correlation. He basically at the beginning is like, as for these 3 bodies, the pure Dharma body, Dharmakaya, is your true nature. The perfect realization body is Sambhogakaya here, is what you know. So almost like you could say your natures of the Dharmakaya is more like just the emptiness. The Sambhogakaya is the kind of knowing quality of this emptiness. It's the kind of aware quality of emptiness. And then the myriad transformation body, the Nirmanakaya, is what you do, like your activity. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of, just about the 3 bodies, that's a kind of nice way to look at it. Buddha has this ungraspable emptiness as their true nature. They have a kind of non-dual knowing quality, is this bliss body of Sambhogakaya, and then they have activity that manifests in the world, and that's Nirmanakaya. And then this, where it's this Gata on 279 matches up these 4 knowings or awarenesses, here called knowledges, with these. So the perfect mirror awareness, jnana, is your nature purified. So that's is the Dharmakaya, basically, is also called the perfect mirror. Knowing. Universal knowledge, or often translated as equality awareness, is the mind with no defects. And so this is like this kind of knowing that is the Sambhogakaya is called like equality knowing, because it sees everything equally. And then all penetrating knowledge, sometimes called discriminating knowledge, but actually it's a non-dual awareness, but it's able to also make distinctions. It's the traditional way of looking at it. And that's part of the Nirmanakaya. It can make Shakyamuni Buddha in a human form can make distinctions between rocks and vegetables when he's eating. And then all succeeding knowledge is more usually translated like all accomplishing knowledge, or or activity knowing. Here's like a great round mirror, but that's the kind of functioning, active knowing in the world. And then those last two go along with the Nirmanakaya. And then Red Pine has this note here about how the 8 consciousnesses give rise to these 4 kinds of wisdom, 4 kinds of knowledge. So that's something you can spend some time looking at.
And this is from the Lokavatara Sutra. This conversation is spurred.
It's definitely related to that. Does he say that?
At the beginning, it's just what the student is asking
Oh
about.
yeah, read that, Yep. Lokavatara Sutra has these 3 bodies, and I guess it also does the 4 kinds of knowledge. And it's one of those Yogacara sources. And it definitely has the 8 consciousnesses. Storehouse consciousness becomes this perfect mirror knowing. So in a way, the 6 ancestors not saying anything too radically new here, but just, I thought it was interesting that he does this whole riff on his Lokavatara Sutra teachings.
The last 2 that are supposed to be related to are a little bit, or a little bit hard for me to penetrating knowledge, see without effort, understand how that relates to the sort of constantly appearing Dharma that is transforming.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure I understand the relationship with those last 2 types of knowledge too.
It would be like seeing the constantly changing appearances, but knowing and being able to use them or work with them while still knowing that there's actually no difference between them, something like that. Whereas the earlier one, like the perfect mirror, you could say that also has that implication. But, like equality wisdom, for example, would be like you just see, you don't even make distinctions at all, just like seeing everything equally. Whereas this is more like you're making discriminations, but you know that ultimately there is no difference. Those are 2 different kinds of knowing or wisdom.
It really reminds me a little bit of the pairing of, he talks about no thought, meaning that you don't kill thoughts,
Yeah.
but that you accept the thoughts almost, and you see,
Yeah.
see the seer, so to speak.
Yep. There was a section in here that was very much like what you just said, but don't know if be able to find it. Something about not ending your thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, here on 291, near the top of 291. The wise and able, which is Huineng's name, has no trick. He doesn't stop any thought at all. Confronting things, his mind keeps stirring. How could his enlightenment grow? Because a monk quoted this other verse that says, a sleeping dragon has a trick, it can stop all kinds of thoughts. Confronting things, its mind doesn't stir. Day by day, its enlightenment grows. So he's saying, I don't stop any thought at all. Confronting things, my mind keeps stirring. So how could enlightenment actually grow? Because it's not something that comes from it. So it's real non-dual expression.
It's another kind of 2-poem thing, like
Yes.
like the original.
Yes,
again,
very
that
much like the
story
original. Yep.
about the polishing the mirror.
Yep, exactly.
I once saw a translation of Huineng as prajna talent.
Yeah, yeah. Wisdom, ability, wise and able. Yeah, it works. There's another nice short one in section 9 in the appendix there, on page 289.
Oh yeah.
Among asked the master, who understands the meaning of Huang Mei, the fifth ancestor? And Huang says, someone who understands the teaching of the Buddha. And the monk says, do you, master, understand it or not? And he said, I don't understand the teaching of Buddha. Another highlight there on 288 in this conversation. Oh, it's actually it's a student of it's not the sixth ancestor himself, but it's one of his students kind of like telling him about how his teacher teaches, and he says, if you don't see if there's a mind that exists or not, then you would always be in samadhi. So how could you leave or enter? If you can leave or enter, it isn't true samadhi. It's this other monk talking about, oh, I practice in this way where I enter samadhi. And so because true samadhi, you can't enter it or leave it. Well, I think we've wrapped up this platform sutra of the sixth ancestor. Tony never made it through.
I invited him a couple times,
Oh, what happened?
so maybe I did something wrong, but
Or maybe
maybe he wasn't around.
So I think this is great that we studied this, and I had never read Pine's commentary before.
Yeah, I really love this.
It's just one of the Zen classics, and you would know. A lot of it, I think, sounds like this is just like sounds like normal Zen stuff, but in its day, this was like something really new.
He invented the Zen stuff.
He invented the Zen stuff, and a lot of those things that we were talking about, where he sort of reverses what it says in the sutra. I don't think other non-Zen people were ever doing stuff like that.
No.
They would just comment straightforwardly, this is what the sutra means. So and these dialogue stories, maybe the first Zen dialogues some of those were actually became koans. These are probably the first ones ever. First koans were with the sixth ancestor. I don't think they're earlier ones. The first five ancestors, I don't think there were any dialogues that are really pithy dialogues like that.
I just always love his fresh take on everything.
Yeah.
You know, he never just spews out what someone else says or what was written. He never says, "Oh yeah, that's blah blah blah." You know, like it was written something. So no, it really is. Nothing subtle.
Yeah.
You know that it's just true insight and it's just fresh, expression of it.
Very playful.
Never just sort of mush, that he's gotten from someone else.
He does do this thing with sutras where he's supposed to illiterate, right? So he'll say, well, read me the part of the sutra you have a question. But then he'll do this very fresh interpretation.
Well, I'm always aware in reading the sutra about the fact that he's illiterate. And it's always a striking fact to me that sort of behind everything is the fact that he never learned to read. It didn't slow him down. It didn't, I think he must have had people read to him the sutras. Because he could quote them back at length.
Yeah.
He did quite often. He would recite large sections of sutra to someone who was asking a question about it.
He had to like play the sutra game because he was doing the Buddhism thing. It's part of what you gotta do. So thanks.
Thank you.
And this is the end of one incarnation of this group. We'll start next time with something, now for something completely different. We dedicate the merit of our study of the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Ancestor to all Zen practitioners everywhere. May they see their nature and be Buddha.
We're going to put out a bit of a call to people to let them know that we're starting